Hello my fellow working class heroes, good day. I am Carlo and welcome to Carlo Excels. These are the objectives of this episode. First, we're gonna talk about what exactly is an Excel function, and then we're gonna talk about the parts of an Excel function and how to self-learn Excel functions. Let's do a quick review of something you already learned from a previous lesson. So, there are two main types of entries that you can put on cells. There are formulas and there are data. So, there are two types of formulas. There are what we know as the basic formulas, and then you have functions. Then you have data, and the two main types of data are text and values. We already talked about text, we already talked about values, we already talked about basic formulas. And in this lesson, we'll talk about functions. Excel function. An Excel function is an operation done in Excel that can do more complex tasks that basic formulas can't do. Excel functions can also summarize procedures that will normally take multiple operations to do. On the screen right now is a bunch of data of students, and if you were with us during our previous lesson, you will recognize this as the lesson from the cutting, copying, and pasting lesson. What we currently have here are these bunch of students over here. You have 5 of them, and then you have their MAPE grades from grade 7 all the way to grade 10. These are text data, and these are value data. Say for example, we want to find out the average MAPE grade of each student, and at the same time, we want to find out the standard deviation of the MAPE grades of each student. Now, we already learned from a previous lesson, the basic calculations lesson, that average is actually a multi-step calculation. To get average, if you remember, what we do is, so we're gonna use the formula bar for this, equal, and then open parenthesis. We have B2 plus C2 plus D2 plus E2, close parenthesis, divide by 4. So you have addition first of all of the elements divided by the number of elements, and then you get enter. That is the average. Now we're gonna copy paste this downwards and you get the average of all of the students. And to get the standard deviation, you're gonna require many more stages of calculation than that. In fact, when I searched the internet for a picture of the calculation of standard deviation, this is what the calculation for standard deviation looks like. I am not even gonna try that in Microsoft Excel anymore. Just like what was mentioned a while ago, functions can actually do or summarize calculations that will normally take multiple steps. In fact, there are functions for averages and for standard deviations. I will teach these functions in later videos, but I'm gonna show them to you as a proof of concept. Say for example, we want the average of these 4 numbers. All we will have to do is enter the function average like so, and then we highlight the range of the cells that we want to average, close parenthesis, and that is the average of those cells. And yes, Control C also works with functions because just like with basic calculations, the references will adjust based on where you copy and where you paste the function. And for standard deviation, yes, there is a function for that. Instead of having to go through this long process of calculating the standard deviation, in Microsoft Excel, you have the stdev function, or that is the standard deviation. So you just have to enter this function over here and then highlight the cells with which you want to get the standard deviation for, and then you simply press enter. This is now the standard deviation for these cells. Copy paste that, and you can quickly get a standard deviation of all of these 5 rows. In fact, functions can do much more than that. For example, if you don't want the average of just this student, if you want the average of all of the MAPE grades of all 5 students, you can enter the function average, and instead of simply highlighting this row, you can actually highlight the whole range like so. So the range now says B2 to E6. So you have this range over here, then close parenthesis, and now you have the average grade of all of these students. And you can do the same thing for standard deviation as well. So stdev, and then we highlight the whole range, close parenthesis, enter, and now you have the standard deviation for all 20 elements here. Actually, functions can do so much more than simply calculations. You have functions, for example, that trim the spaces off of names. You have functions that convert date values to words. You have functions that perform logical decision making. You have functions that transfer values from one cell to another based on a given set of conditions, and a lot of other functions. Now let's talk about the parts of a function. A function has two main parts. First, you have what we know as a function name, and then we have the arguments of the function. First, you have to know that you can never call out a function without the equal sign. So if in fact, if I type in the word average here, nothing happens. Microsoft Excel is simply going to treat this as regular text. If you want to call out a function, you have to use it within a formula. In other words, you have to press the equal sign. So when I press the equal sign and Microsoft Excel already knows that this is going to be a formula, that is when Microsoft Excel is going to start looking for functions. More specifically, it's going to look for function names. So for average, the function name is, of course, the word average, right? This is the function name, which is average. In a formula, after you type in the function name, just like what I did here right now, to start the function, you then have to type in an open parenthesis, just like so. Now, after you type in an open parenthesis, the function is going to start looking for arguments. Now, please note that arguments can be text and they can also be values. And because they can be values, they can in fact be calculations, they can be constants, and they can be cell references. The types of arguments that you can use for every function will of course depend on the function that you are going to use. In this case, average is the type of function that requires numbers, alright? It requires values. So in this case, we can in fact enter numbers like this. For example, average of 5 and 5 and 5 and 5 and 5. Alright, so you see here that what I entered here and then close parenthesis to close the function to tell Microsoft Excel that these are the arguments for the function. And of course, the arguments are separated by comma. Now, you will notice that these are constants, and if I press enter here, you will see of course that the average of 5 fives is 5. Aside from constants being the arguments, of course, you can also use cell references just like what I showed you a while ago. So, cell B2 can be one of your arguments, cell C2, cell D2, and cell E2. So this is like telling Microsoft Excel in this case, I want to use the average function, and my arguments are whatever is in B2, C2, D2, and E2. So therefore, please average the numbers on those cells. And if I press enter, that is your result. And if in case you didn't know, you can actually mix constants and cell references within arguments of a function. Say for example, I'm gonna put here again average, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the 275s here in C2 and D2, and then I'm gonna add the constant 75 and then another 75. So because of this, all of what I'm trying to average are now 75s, and I press enter, your answer is 75. Now, in case you didn't know this, functions can actually be used as parts of basic calculations because functions by themselves can also be values. So say for example, I want the sum of all of these averages. So what I can actually do is, equals this plus this plus this plus this plus this equal to this number over here, which is 409.25. Or I can use the average function and then add them together. So please take note, the answer is 409.25. I'm gonna write it down here so we have a point of comparison later. So what I can do is this, average, and then use this function, which is of course exactly the same as what is written in F2, right? Plus average of this plus average of this plus average of this row plus average of this row, right? Now we have a long formula, but when you press enter, the answer will be also 409.25, exactly the same as what we had a while ago. So again, you can actually add functions together as if they were numbers. And yes, in case you were wondering, you can in fact concatenate the results of functions together. So just like if you remember what we did here a while ago, we added all of these averages. Let's try changing the plus signs into ampersands and see what happens. Alright, so we're now trying to concatenate these averages, and the result you get is this in text form. So I was thinking it should be obvious by now, but if in case you were wondering, yes, you can in fact add functions and constants together. Say for example, I want to add the average of these four numbers plus 100. Alright, so what I can do is equals to declare calculation, and then you have the number, the constant 100 plus the average of these numbers over here. And then you can guess, of course, that the result should be 175.5, and yes, it is. Next, did you know that basic calculations can actually be done within arguments of a function? Take for example this row over here. If we're gonna average all of this, if you remember, the answer is supposed to be 75.5. Say for example, we want the average to be 75. For the average to be 75, what needs to happen is all of the elements need to be 75. So in other words, you have to subtract 3 from this, and then you have to add 1 in this. So let's try that. Average equals average, and then let's put in the first argument. So you have here B2, and then for that to be 75, B2 minus 3. So in other words, within an argument of a function, we're doing a basic calculation. So you're telling Microsoft Excel, instead of averaging just 78, you subtract 3 from 78 and use the result as your argument. So B2 minus 3, and then this is already 75, so no need to touch that. And then this is also 75, so no need to touch that as well. And then you have here E2. E2 is 74, alright? So what you do is E2 plus 1 to make it 75. So now you have basic calculations within the arguments of a function. If I press enter, the answer should be 75. Yes, it is. And if in case you didn't know, a function can actually be an argument within another function. In Excel, we call this nesting, alright? We nest a function within a function. What that means is a function is an argument of another function. So let's try this. I'm gonna put in this cell, let me color that here. I wanna put in this cell the average of all of these numbers, alright? So what I'm gonna do is average of this range, and then this is the result that I'm gonna get, 81.85. Now, if I average the averages of all of the rows, mathematically speaking, I'm also supposed to get 81.85. So to demonstrate averaging average functions, this is what I'm gonna do. And please watch. Equals average, and then let's enter the arguments of the function. So for the arguments of the function, I can put in the average of this row. And you will notice now I am using functions as arguments of the function, comma, the average of this row, comma, the average of this row, comma, the average of the fourth row, comma, and lastly, the average of the last row. Okay? So, we now, of course, it's confusing now with all of the parentheses, but of course, we have to put in another parenthesis to close the very last one. And then, of course, I have to correct this because I misspelled average the first name of the function. So, let me correct that. And now, when I press enter, the answer should be 81.85, and yes, it is. So, once again, functions can actually be nested within each other, meaning functions can be arguments of other functions. So that's it for the basics of functions. Please understand that to show you the basics of functions, I had to use the average function without necessarily explaining it. But do not worry, there is another lesson in the future, there's another video in the future which specifically tackles the average function, its uses, its weaknesses, etc. And yes, there is also a lesson on the standard deviation function. Once again, please subscribe to the channel so that when those lessons come, you don't miss them. So where exactly do you find a complete list of functions in your version of Microsoft Excel? If you look at your ribbon, try to find the Formulas tab. So Formulas tab is over here, click that, and you will see here the function library. So you can simply click on one of the categories that, catch your attention. For example, if you want financial functions, these are the financial functions that are available. If you want logical functions, you have text functions, you have date and time functions, you have lookup and reference, math, and you have other functions, for example, for statistics, for engineering, etc. So this is a quick guide regarding the functions that are available in your version of Microsoft Excel. Now, my dear viewers, before we proceed to the next part of this lesson, I really just want to share this. Before I started this channel, I really told myself that before I am going to teach my viewers any of the functions, I first have to teach them, or in other words, teach you, how to learn on your own. And why is that so? Because, let's face it, no matter how hard I try in trying to teach you the function of Microsoft Excel, there are just so many functions, and there are just so many intricacies and nitty-gritties on how to use these functions, and this channel is never gonna be enough to teach you all of them. And because I cannot really necessarily make you learn all of them, maybe the best course of action is to make you learn how to learn on your own. Because, well, I am a teacher too, and aside from teaching Microsoft Excel in this channel, I teach high school students. In fact, I used to teach world history, just like what you can see on the screen right now. Yeah, I know, right? Microsoft Excel, world history, ang layo, no? But, well, it is what it is. So before any lesson in world history, I always tell my students this. So for example, when I'm introducing to them the topic of Egypt in world history, I tell them that, class, there is so much to learn about Egypt. There is so much to know about Egypt, and all of them are really, really interesting. But unfortunately, we only have so much time in discussing world history. In fact, in many cases, I only have a week, if I'm lucky. But in most cases, you only have 3 days, or a world history teacher probably only has 3 days, 4 days, 5 days to discuss world history. And that's never gonna be enough. You cannot expect me as your teacher, that's what I tell my students, you cannot expect me as your teacher to discuss everything there is to know about Egypt, because we're not gonna have enough time for everything else. And yes, we need time for everything else because, as important as ancient Egypt is to world history, it is unfortunately just a small part of world history. Well, of course, some people can argue that it is an important part. Some people will say it's an unimportant part. But whatever the case, ancient Egypt, whether it's important or unimportant, it is still a small part of the whole vast study of world history. So we're never gonna finish world history in this discussion. In fact, there are people, countless people of many generations who have spent their whole lives studying Egypt, and they're not even finished yet. So don't expect that we will finish it when even they are not even finished. And then this is the part where I tell my students that, so therefore class, because I cannot teach you everything, my job here is to simply teach you the basics of ancient Egypt. All I have to teach you is the basics so that if you do your own reading later on, you will at least understand what you are reading because you now have the basics, you now have the foundations. And that is, I hope, what you get in this channel. The foundations. I cannot teach you everything in Microsoft Excel, but I do hope I establish foundations so that when you go and learn things on your own, you will at least understand the things that you're doing because we have established our foundations here. So, okay, how do you learn on your own? The following steps I'm going to tell you or I'm going to teach you are just suggested steps. You may take from them, you may add to them, well, whatever you want. It's your learning experience. But I'm just going to share them because these were the steps that I used when I self-learned Microsoft Excel. Self-learning in Microsoft Excel always starts with an inquiry. It starts with a question. So in this case, for example, let's say for example that your question is, or your problem is, you want to be able to count, or rather you want Excel to be able to count exactly how many failing grades, right? The number of failing grades, meaning grades that are below 75, the number of failing grades that you have in this whole wall of grades. So to be able to count the number of failing grades, you first then have to wonder, how exactly can I teach or tell Microsoft Excel what is a passing grade and what is a failing grade? So now you have your question. How exactly can I ask Excel to determine what is a passing grade or failing grade? Next step is Google is your friend. So let's open Google. Now I'm at Google in incognito mode. These are not my searches. These are trending searches. So do the following. when you're trying to find a question for Excel, I want you to start, or rather, I suggest that you start with the following keywords. Excel forums. I'll explain in a while why we're looking for forums. Excel forums, and then try to ask your question. So in this case, let's say for example, Excel forums, and then I'm gonna type here, decide passing or failing grades. And then press enter. So let's see our search results. Of course, you will see here the videos, but I suggest you do not go to the videos yet. Do not go to the videos yet. I know that they're very tempting, but not yet. Find a forum, alright? So let's find the forum. Here's one that is interesting. So excelforum.com, press on that, and let's get inside the forum. So now the forum has loaded, and you will find that there seems to be some guy in the past that has the same question as you. So the guy is asking, as you can see on the screen, formula to determine students' final result based on multiple criteria. So somebody asked a question, somebody attempted to give an answer, and then the person gave feedback regarding the answer. So there is this exchange. This is why I suggest doing your initial search on forums, because in forums you actually can be able to read the problems of the people who have posted. You can read their problems, and you can then determine if the problems they have is the same as your problem. If you have the same or maybe similar problems, continue reading. If you have different problems, then find another forum. Now, if the person on the page has a similar problem as you and you continue reading, you will usually find a person who answers the question. And then, most importantly, you will then, in most cases, find the original poster of the problem giving feedback, whether the solution worked for them or not. In some cases, they will say, "Thank you very much, this solved my problem." In that case, you will know that the response will, because you have the similar problem as the original poster, this response will also work for you. In some cases, just like this, the original poster said that, "I'm not sorry for being clear the first time, my mistake." And then, in other words, the original solution posted, in other words, this original solution did not work for him, and then another person gave another solution. So you will see this exchange of problems and solutions. So you will learn a lot from exchanges like this, much more than what you can learn with a video with no feedback whatsoever. In fact, if you can see in this forum that we clicked on, the very last post is by the original poster of the problem, and he said, "That worked great, thanks." So what you can do now is you can read through this particular thread and then try to find out what happened. Now that we know that this page has a solution that we're looking for, now time to learn from it. Try to find functions within the solutions. So look through the posts and try to find functions. And now you can see here functions. Of course, as we learned a while ago, functions seem to be these all caps letters right before open parentheses. So if, in this case, looks like a function, and looks like a function, count if, then you also have sum, and then you have or over here. Next step, try to list them down. So for example, I saw there was an if. Do not put equal signs in it. We're just listing them down. So there was an if, there was an or, there was an and, there was a sum, and there was a count if. So list them down so you have a guide. Of course, the next step would be remove the functions that you already know. So for example, in this case, we already know, for example, we know what a sum function is already. So we remove that from the list. Next, try to find out if these functions are in your version of Microsoft Excel. How do you do this? So you put these functions within a formula. So press equals, and then let's try if, right? If this happens and you see if listed down as a formula, and then you already have the description of the function, then that means this function is available in your version of Microsoft Excel. So is or available? Yes, it is. Is and available? Yes, it is. Is count if available? Yes, it is. As I mentioned before, for the purposes of recording videos for this channel, I am using a very old version of Microsoft Excel. This is Microsoft Excel 2010. So let's try a function that I know is not in this version of Microsoft Excel, and that is the brand new, very, very powerful Lambda function. The Lambda function is a very powerful function which is only available in the very, very latest version of Microsoft Excel. What does it look like when a function is not here in Microsoft Excel? So I can try that. I will press equals, and then I'm gonna put in the function name. And you will notice that there is no help, there is no pop-up that appears. So that is a signal for you that this function is not present in this version, in my version of Microsoft Excel. Next step is, you have to ask yourself, is this Excel sheet or workbook something that only I will use? Or is this something that a lot of other people will use? Or is this something that I will have to submit to somebody else, right? Especially for us fellow teachers. You have to determine what versions of Microsoft Excel other people are using. If you have an office and everybody is provided with the exact same version of Microsoft Excel, well and good. But how will you know if the functions that you're going to use is in some other version of Microsoft Excel? Please check the descriptions below this video. On the descriptions below this video, you will actually find a link that points to the support.microsoft.com page. You will see there listed down the Excel functions alphabetically. All of the Excel functions in existence are listed down here. And at the same time, the versions that have these functions are listed down here. For example, you have the ACOT function. ACOT, I don't know. You have the ACOT, the ACOT function. It says there 2013. So what that means is the ACOT function only appeared in the version 2013 of Excel and higher, meaning this function is not available on any version lower than 2013. Or for example, you have the array to text function. Any version below Office 365 does not have this function. Or for example, you have the beta functions which are not in Excel 2007, etc. So you can try to look at this list and figure out, is the function I plan to learn or is the function I plan to use present in the versions of Microsoft Excel of everybody else who is gonna use this. So let's proceed to the next step. Let's assume for a moment that you think you have the function that you're looking for and it is present in your version and it is present in everybody else's version. So time to try it out. This is what you do. Press the name of the function, right? Like this. And then you open parentheses to activate the function. So it's now looking for arguments. So naturally, you don't know how to put in arguments because you don't know how the function works. So what you do is this. Take your mouse cursor and then click on the function name of the in the pop-up that appears after this step. If you click that, what's going to pop out is a help dialog box which explains to you how to use the function. It has the description of the function, so this is what if does. It has the syntax. When we say syntax, the code, the command that you're supposed to use when you're supposed to use a function. So you have the function name, and then these are the arguments. So you have an explanation of the arguments, and then you have certain notes or remarks. And then, of course, you have examples. Try to read through these. And most importantly, if you find it hard to understand the explanations, what you can do is you can copy this data, just like what it suggests here. Copy the data into a blank worksheet and then try the formulas for yourself so that you can find out how these formulas work. In most cases, or rather, I hope in most cases, you will be able to use the formula for yourself after reading through this and after trying it out and playing with it on your own. Next step, after reading through this and after trying out the formulas for yourself, that is the time that I actually suggest that you try finding YouTube channels, because in many cases, YouTube channels will actually show you certain aspects of that particular function that Microsoft Excel's help does not show you. So right now I'm in YouTube. Again, this is an incognito browser. This is not my account. These are not my suggested videos. So how do you find Excel videos? So try this. What you do is you, of course, start with the keyword Excel, and then you type in your function name, for example, if, and then of course, type in the word function. and then press enter. In many cases, you will already see a lot of tutorials regarding how to use that particular function. So watch the videos that catch your fancy. Try to look at the thumbnails or try to listen a little bit to their explanations. If you are looking for a function or if you're looking for a solution to a problem that's financial in nature, try to find a channel that deals with financial Excel uses. If you are a teacher, just like me, try to find a channel that is also geared for education, etc. And most importantly, in many cases, these channels will also give you examples. As you watch the video, look at their examples, try to recreate their examples in Microsoft Excel so that you can learn faster on your own. So say for example, you already know how to use the if function, you've learned the basics of it. The next step I would then suggest is you go back to Excel. Now, instead of simply searching for Excel if function or the name of the function, I then want you to add in the next keywords, tips and tricks, and then press enter. In many cases, you will then have videos that specifically give you like things like advanced tips or advanced tricks on how to use that particular function. So you will learn a lot more. And once again, if these channels or if these videos give you examples on how to use them, try to recreate the examples so you can learn on your own. So this channel is going to start discussing functions. We're going to start, of course, with the basic ones. That is why I had to do this video first regarding the universal basics of all functions. But of course, I do understand that I already taught you how to learn for yourselves. So I understand that there might be a risk that you may not want to watch the videos of the channel anymore because you realize that, oh, you can learn this on your own. But of course, let me give you the reminder or the review that, as I mentioned in a previous lesson or in a previous video, this channel is heavily curated for teachers, especially in the Philippines. So for my fellow teachers, the content that you will find here are still very useful. And well, come on, let's be realistic. You cannot really learn everything from this channel. I cannot really teach you everything in this channel. But at the very least, I do hope that this channel will contribute to your self-learning. So once again, please subscribe to the channel so that you won't miss future lesson videos when they come. So that's it for our lesson on the basic functions of Microsoft Excel and how to self-learn functions in Microsoft Excel. Once again, I am Carlo and this is Carlo Excels. Thank you very much for watching.